So here is the difficult question that we have set ourselves. Nigel, I'm going to kick the football,
to me,
the hot potato, to your door. And let me just set this premise of where we got when we were eating pakora earlier as a staff lunch in this building. The prophetic is minimally accepted if we're honest. Can you just make sure you are in the comments being honest with me? Is the prophetic in your nation minimally accepted, or is it widespread embraced? Just give us a snapshot in the comments of how the prophetic word, the prophets, the word of the Lord is received in your region, in your territory, in your dynamic. Now, we have little pockets like Global Prophetic Alliance, like what we do here in Glasgow, where we are all about the word of God and we're embracing it in day-to-day life. But Nigel made this point of really how churches struggle to have any clue of what to do with the word of the Lord, what even is a prophet. It's rejected almost out of hand. Evangelicals think we're nuts. I'm quoting some of you. Hi, John. It just exists, almost none, minimally. Minimally is hardly. Somebody is saying, I'm not reading a widely accepted. Anywhere, would that be fair? Because the comments are scrolling quite quickly. Nowhere is saying, somebody's saying, not widely embraced. That,
so welcome and well received in our local church, so refreshing. Well, hallelujah, there's one comment in the midst of all of them.
But isn't that shocking that it's only one?
Yeah.
So what I pulled together, because Sam was supposed to be on, but what I pulled together is those of us who've led churches. Jennifer, you led churches in London. Nigel and Louise within the Irish context, me within the Scottish context. I don't know how many decades of church leadership are at this table. Quite a lot. And we've set ourselves the task of what is the problem and why. And many don't even know about born again Christians in my church, let alone prophets. Oh, my days. Is that Italy?
Are they reading the Bible?
Yeah.
Cindy says, are they reading the Bible?
I see, she's right, Cindy in the Netherlands. Are they reading the Bible? Well spotted. Yeah. Okay. Somebody, hi, Suze, in the local church in Canning Town, in London, accepted, but minimally. Only if it's nice
words.
Oh, Diana Lang, you're on it. Only if it's nice words. Marcus,
only for blessing.
Minimally in Cape Town. Minimally, especially in the Bible Belt of Texas. Heidi Jones. Okay. Gift of prophecy, but the office hardly ever. There we go. No, I read your spelling. I'm dyslexic. I got it. So yes. So we have, would we say crisis? Would we say that's crisis? That you're actually going to need the prophets to set the timings, the pace, the understanding of what God is doing, the absolute vitality of life that the prophets bring, even though they're strident and strong and often hard to deal with on occasions. They are. Maybe that's part of our problem. So type your questions. Don't miss this moment where we all have eyes on your comments. And Nigel, over to you. Why are we in such a mess in the anti-prophet vibe?
Well, thinking back, Emma, to the moment that we talked about this, which was a couple of hours earlier today, and it's just worth saying this, that we were doing podcasts with the staff. You were doing them, and you were asking the staff the things about coming into a prophet ministry or environment that changed for them. And a bit of a plug, the podcast will be coming out soon on Power TV, and they are brilliant.
Yes.
Our staff have done amazing comments.
They blew me away.
Wasn't it incredible?
They blew me away.
And we were going around the room and I saw you heading towards me and I had this thought, what am I going to say? Because they're young and prophets and whatever, and here's this old man sitting there. But it occurred to me that the biggest learn I've had in the 2 years I've come into GPA is that for most of us in church leadership, and probably in the church as well, we're entirely unaware of the prophet world that exists around the world with the church. And that makes us, as church leaders, very ignorant of what's going on in the prophet world and the working out of that. And because we're church leaders, what happens is we reject it because we don't understand it, and it might show us up. And I think that's the biggest issue right now, my job is talking to church leaders around the world who are part of GPA.
Yeah.
And without doubt, the question that comes up all the time is, how do I handle this prophetic in the context of church?
Yeah.
Take a group of prophets, put them on Raising Prophets. It's grand. We can all talk about the stuff, and
Yes.
you've got you and Louise and Sam and prophets who can handle it. Bring it into the local church.
Yeah.
And it's a different thing.
It's
and
a different skill set to line manage
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And even in the changing world, I don't know if on Power Hours you've dealt with the sort of 3 breaths of Ezekiel yet, but that's going to present us with even bigger problems.
Yes.
In the fullness of time.
And that we've alluded to it in Power Hour, but really we feel we're in the third wind or the third breath of the prophetic movement, which is a more strident form of prophet that is getting the bride ready, that the prophets were about personal words and then they were about maybe the church dynamic. But now God is asking the prophets to get the bride ready. And that's a whole fiery holiness.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I just pick out 1 or 2 key words you said there? You used the word unaware rather than the word rejection.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by that this is not like now there are some places where they're cessationists, they just won't tolerate anything of the spirit. But at that point, that's not a rejection of the prophet, that's a rejection of the spirit. And that's a slightly different conversation, the cessationalist conversation. Because if you're cessationalist and you believe the spirit and spiritual gifts and healing and miracle are not relevant, and tongues, kayamana shokayala, is not relevant for today. Look, that's a very different conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's park that sense of the issue of cessationism. But we're talking about spirit-filled Pentecostal charismatic churches where they do like, can I say, sort of the spirit, but at least they got a toe in the water. But you're still saying the word unaware.
And it's unaware of the world of the office of the prophet is primarily what I'm saying.
Bingo.
Because, well, what do you do with a prophet if
Yes.
you're a church leader? If you and you say, well, I have a prophet on staff. I have to be honest, I haven't come across a church with a prophet on staff, and I've come across a lot of them because
It's your job to do that, to coach leaders.
yeah,
Yes.
and I've got prophetic people. That's very different. But prophets, that's a whole different ball game. And prophets move in their own world, as you well know.
Yes.
And I just think the thing that I've learnt in coming to GPA in the last 2 years has been, this is a world that I really didn't know existed. And it's not ignorance. I mean, I've been involved
Yes.
with Glory of Zion and 1 or
Yes,
2 of those
yes.
places for years, but it never struck me there's this whole world of the office of prophet and this idea of speaking the prophetic word of the Lord, the word
Yeah,
of the Lord,
yeah.
into not only into people or into churches, but into nations.
Yeah.
That's a whole different deal for most church leaders.
Yes,
That's
no,
in reality.
absolutely. And if the word unaware is your word of choice, then that means they don't know what to do in terms of how do you weigh, how do you test, how do you give platform, how do you line manage, how do you invite, how all of that is missing under the banner of unaware. I think some of you are right. That there is DG Rebecca, hi, it's a problem with the Holy Spirit in general. Yes, I think if you have a problem with the strength of the Spirit, you have a problem with the strength of the office of the prophet. And the office of the prophet is perhaps the fieriest manifestation of the Spirit, apart from physical fire appearing on your head. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yes. Jennifer.
Do you know, I'd love to just break it into 2 aspects, if you don't mind, Nigel. But I really agree with what you said in terms of the lack of prophet that we see in the church. But, some of the comments we see people saying, there is some prophetic in their church. But I think a huge problem, even where the prophetic is accepted, and what's really gone wrong in the last 20 years or so, is that the training that's come when prophets, particularly itinerating prophets, have gone into churches, released the word of the Lord from a platform, and there was a lot of excitement about that, over 20
Yes.
years. But actually, what happened was, when the prophets left, 6 months later, people in the congregation come to the pastors saying, look, these words haven't come to pass. And there's a lot of disappointment and disillusionment. And that's for the lack of proper training about weighing words and the conditionality of words.
Absolutely.
So we've actually, and I put myself in this category as well, we have taught people wrong so that when prophets have come and been welcomed, there's been a bit of a car crash over time for the pastor in the church to deal with. And I think, personal view, that many sort of pastors or leaders or apostles, whatever they were, but have pulled away from the prophetic and only been prepared to have it operating really at a very sort of contained low level. Now, that's one issue where we can see the cure for that, proper training and
better teacher and better communication.
Could, of course, remedy that. But then we go back to the really key question, which is the point Nigel's raised about, Ephesians tells us we need prophets. And look, anything that's in the Bible, we need.
Yes.
Difficult though it may be to manage or to give birth to. And so I would say, pastors have got to be looking back and encouraged to look back and read in Ephesians 4, I think it's verses 11 to 12, about the fivefold ministry. And I'll stop in a moment, but when I was in London pastoring in a church called Kingsgate for 10 years, and we were very much modelling and trying to incorporate the fivefold gifts. Honestly, I would say my happiest and most fulfilling times as a prophet were working with apostles. I mean, I loved all the offices.
Yes.
And, I wasn't always like that. I was a grumpy so-and-so at one time. When I had a word, I didn't want anybody really to tell me about that my timing was off or to restrict how it was implemented. Because as you and I know, everybody around this table knows, when you hear that word from the Lord, it feels very instant.
Yes.
And I wanted to be off like a bullet. But I really learned to value the restraining, I'm chuckling, the restraining apostles who kind of said, that is so great, Jennifer. Can we just look at how that works within a framework? Can we get all our minds together? And sure, it's still an unfolding dynamic, this fivefold, and we certainly didn't get it all right there, but I was forever changed. Yeah. And now I realise, can I even go farther? Prophets today will not be who they should be if we don't learn to work within the fivefold. The fivefold wasn't there in the Old Testament. We had amazing prophets then, but actually we are in New Testament times. If we don't get this right, we will never come into our fullness, which of course should be something to grieve us.
And you're hitting quite a number of issues there, Jennifer. The issues of our own lack of teaching and training expertise to make a people ready, our own immaturity within the movement, and the issue, somebody's saying, what's wrong with the Spirit? Actually, there's nothing wrong with the Spirit, but a lot of people hate the Spirit. I mean, genuinely hate the manifestations of the Spirit because they think it's out of control. And they don't realise how the Spirit of God hovers and broods and shakes and moves. So just to answer that question. So John and Perla are saying the fivefold is being restored. Yes, yes, yes. Do you want to, we're in problem identification here rather than in solution. We will try to suggest some solutions. Do you want to wade in on man the mess?
Well, one of the big issues is that we're trying to put prophets into or recognize them within local church structure that are led by pastors.
Yes.
That's never going to work full stop because as we know, look, the stuff in this book is true. We have a blueprint from heaven and we have got to get with the blueprint.
Yes.
Apostles and prophets being the foundation. And prophets and apostles work best together and the other three gifts then attached to that. And it kind of sometimes surprises me how we know so much and understand the theory, but our level of practice in successfully seeing the fivefold in this day and age is almost worse than it was back in the, let's say, the 80s, because we did have some quite healthy models, particularly in the British Isles, particularly in the UK, not so much Ireland, at that time. And it's interesting how it's kind of, as the senior pastor kind of empire sort of thing came into
Yeah.
being.
Christian monarchy.
There is
Yeah.
no room for prophets there. Now, we had an interesting situation in Ireland, in that the church that Nigel and I planted back in the early 2000s, the Lord spoke to us really clearly and said, welcome the prophets. Welcome the prophets. But I have to tell you, even in those early days of the 2000s, the prophets who came, some who are very well known, like Stacey Campbell
Yep.
and others, who came through our doors, I'm not sure the capacity was there for her to operate in her fullness. And as I reflect,
Wow.
most of what international prophets brought to us were personal words, still at that stage, even though they were in the office of prophet. And I never saw the town shift because a prophet was there. Now,
massive.
and this is the shift, even as I know we haven't talked
It's
a lot about
massive.
the three breaths in Ezekiel.
Yes.
But we are coming into a place where the apostles need to be so robust and so expansive in their ability to hold and to release strategy for the word of the Lord. Because there's prophets that are growing up in this time and age who have the weight of authority, who can shift things.
I mean, that
It's
is
there.
it. They can, but the platforms aren't there to receive them.
And the
Yeah.
wineskin isn't yet there enough, and the partnership between apostles and prophets is still not there sufficiently. And that's it's a kind of a balancing act, and the prophets are really growing in the earth at this
Yes.
stage and coming to maturity, and boy, we need the others in the fivefold to catch that hunger, because this is what is going to bring the body to maturity, and this
Yes.
is going to bring about the harvest and the return.
I think I could count on one hand a quality introduction, and you guys know, you watch my social media, how much I'm zooming around all over the place and how many platforms I stand on. I could count on one hand when the introduction to what I was about to bring was well enough done that it could be received, and there could be a full flight capability of the word of the Lord, where it wasn't even as banal or as basic as, here's a strong-minded, or strong extrovert personality, we're going to make a space for an extrovert personality. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the ability to say things like, we love the provocation of the word of the Lord, and we're going to sit in this after. We don't want the prophet to hold back. We actually want to hear the fullness of the revelation, and we are going to do business in sitting and reviewing that afterwards. Or we know that the prophet loves well, and their love comes in quite a strident way. Or we understand the portion of the prophet. I mean, and therefore they're going to get us, and they're going to show us some blind spots, and they're going to encourage us where we've got some things right. I mean, I just don't hear that, but I do hear, oh, we're not sure why we've invited her. Maybe this is too much. Or we don't know that we're ready for this. Or I've heard, we don't know whether we'll ever have her back, before I've said a word. And you just think, come on, guys, there's no platform here because you guys aren't ready in your due diligence. Now, I know we've got a communication issue as well. So come on, we're both taking responsibility here, both sides. But it doesn't happen. Can I just ask in the comments here? This is exposing of the prophetic movement. How many of you have seen national words that prophets have prophesied come to pass? Oh, how many prophets? Suzanne is waving at me through the glass, the class behind the glass. How many of you have seen prophets hold themselves to a standard where they were detailed, specific, measurable, conditionally well enough explained that you had the hope of a measurement after? Some of you are saying never. Some of you are saying not many. Some of you are saying yes. Yes, I mean, I haven't, not many. Any other, sad, some of you are saying, you haven't, Betty Ross. Okay, mine did, yes, yes. Oh my, never for a US prophet that I can think of, says Liz. Wow, 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 wow. That's
very
heartbreaking,
damning.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've been in a couple of
I
situations
have
where
some. I have some, but would it be fair to say that the comments, and you, can I say, our watchers, you guys in Power Hour family tend to love the prophetic. So if you guys are going, not many,
because often the words aren't specific enough to be measurable, so we can say, yes, that did happen.
somebody saying red heifers is a bus. I don't think I've ever been as exercised and shouting on a podcast. I think
got a bit excited
I got
about it.
overly over
No,
the
it's fine.
nonsense
It was
of the
appropriate.
slapping of Jesus across the face by wanting to reenact an old covenant sacrificing of animals like his blood wasn't sufficient. I was so cross about it. You just have to watch the What the Prophet Say podcast. But yes, okay.
It's an
Sorry,
offence.
we'll not divert into my button pressed earlier.
Uh-huh.
But this is interesting.
The answers are there.
The
It's
answers
very-
are there. Yeah, very little.
I mean, there must be a few good examples.
Somebody saying Joshua Giles, he's a superstar. I love him. Yeah, okay. Yes.
I've had some situations where I have heard a prophet prophesy and say the proof of that this word is true will be X, and X happened, but I never followed up whether the other bit, which was the meat of the word, actually ever came true. But it wasn't in Ireland. It was actually in Pennsylvania. I mean, we're into a territory where we need prophets to be bold enough to say X, Y, and Z, and for it to be measurable. And the other thing, Emma, is prophets need to support prophets so that we can encourage that boldness. And then we need the capacity with apostles to say, I want you to prophesy as far as you possibly can, and I'm going to be here to hold whatever the consequences are. That's the sort of partnerships and encouragements we need.
So we've kind of identified, I mean, is there any good news? It doesn't feel so far like so few platforms that know what to do, so little decent training, even from ourselves. We've got to put our hands up and say we've been lacking in specificity. We've been not very good at briefing. The church hasn't been mature enough to receive. We're in this small prophetic world that most of the Spirit-filled church is totally unaware of. Any other problems? Or do we need to move to some solutions?
Let's get solution orientated.
Yes.
Before we are baptized.
Some of
in
you are
this.
mentioning names here, and that's fascinating. We salute them actually because there's some great generals. Can I say there is a group, it's maybe just as well that I'm not totally remembering their names, who looked at words, the word of the Lord. David, was it for 2023? They looked at the word of the Lord. We're not going to name names. And word of the Lord for 2022 and 2020, all of the years he's waving at me behind the glass. And they assessed as a semi-independent group the big heavy hitters whose names you're mentioning. And actually, the results of words coming to pass was really low. And what they said was that some of the prophets just prophesied almost everything. So by virtue of like getting a machine gun out and having a shot at prophesying almost everything, because they were almost too prevalent on social media, that you'd a hit of getting some things right just because the sheer volume of words you prophesied, but that it wasn't enough. It wasn't different enough from a political commentator, political pundit to be noteworthy. We didn't have better odds than the political commentator was really, and I think probably that would be fair comment. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yes. You're absolutely right. Some of you, some of the guys are absolutely on point. Nigel, let's talk solutions.
Solutions. Well, let me give, because my apostle brain is in overdrive as we're talking, because that's exactly what I'm looking for is solutions. Let me just paint a picture of how we arrived at a certain solution for the church we were in, which was fairly cutting edge. We had pursued it. pursued the church as a cutting edge church. I don't know that we weren't fivefold because we didn't have the fivefold express, but we didn't really understand it when we started out, and we were gradually going into it, and then COVID hit. But the way we would operate would be, first and foremost, as the senior leader of the church, when a prophet was coming in, I would welcome them and welcome them as a prophet. Now, I take that from the guys like Bill Johnson, who talk about, if you receive a prophet, you will receive a prophet's reward.
Quoting Matthew.
And I think that's I had to spend some time on that one because I think that's a very, very important one. And people go, and if you receive a teacher, if you receive an apostle, but the scripture doesn't say that. And I think the reason it doesn't say it is that the prophet is the hard one to receive. They're going to come with the word of the Lord.
Yes.
A teacher's going to expound the scriptures, and a pastor's going to come and care for everyone, or an apostle might give you some structures or send you out or something. But a prophet comes with the cutting edge, and therefore, if I am confident enough to have a prophet into the house, then I want to stand up there and say, we will receive you as a prophet, regardless of what you say. And these qualifications that you talk about, Emma, I don't think you ever came to our church. We didn't know each other at the time.
true.
But we've had Sharon Stone, Stacey Campbell, Rachel Hickson, Dennis Goldsworthy Davis, and JC Alzamoro, and it just keeps going on and on because we were the place they came into in Dublin, one of the places, probably one of the only places in the Dublin, Greater Dublin area. So I want to emphasize that for every leader that might be listening. You as the leader have got to stand up there and welcome them, because you're looking for the prophet and you're looking for the prophet's reward, and that's vital. And then you let the prophet do their business and you give them the word, or you let them give the word. But then you, as the church leadership and the church, have a responsibility to weigh the word.
Come on.
And we provided an environment. We called it the tent. And we called it the tent because the Lord gave us this word about lifting your tent pegs and expanding out.
Yeah.
So every Monday night, without fail, we had the tent meeting. Now, sometimes we just got together and worshipped. Sometimes we just prayed together or whatever. But when a prophet had been in the house, that was the place where we put on the centre of the ground, if you like. We gathered in a circle. None of this lines facing the front and me talking back. Put it in a circle, and we said, right, here was what Dennis came in with last weekend. We know him. He's one of our prophets in the house. Here's what he said. What are we seeing about that? Now, can I give one example of that? Is that okay?
Can I just say, that is, I hope, listen to what he's saying. The introduction, but then the more private, safe space of the people on the ground going, but most people aren't even as committed as that to the word of the Lord. They just want comfort. They just want self-help. They just want massaged. And that is not what the prophet does.
And you've got to get over restricting the prophet to just the nice words.
Yep.
You've got to say, you come with the freedom to speak into this house. And as a leader, I am confident enough to pick up the pieces afterwards, even if none of us like what you're going to bring.
Fair enough.
Because I know my people, and I know you. And therefore, those two things come together, and we have it. And we had a situation in 2014 where, in a row, 4 prophets. Now, if I tell you, it was my own spiritual father who'd known me for 30 years. It was Stacey Campbell the next week, and I didn't invite Stacey in. She just happened to arrive with Wesley, and the head spinning, and she says, get up and go. Nigel, get up and go, as Abraham got up and went, not knowing where you're going, in front of the whole church. Never gave me any warning. I don't think she had any warning. I think it was pretty ecstatic. The very next week, it so happened Rachel Hickson was in the house and gave a pretty similar word about wells and get up and go. Now, when you get that is really affecting for your church. You've got to bring that into the middle of the church and say, how do you handle this? And that was March, and we were still handling it in July. And at the end of the day, it was interesting. We had a lease that was going to run out, and we decided not to renew it because God said, get up and go. And so it wasn't that a prophet came in, said something, and we went off and just did it.
And the whole process.
The process was a long one.
And the conditions. And we must take the word of the Lord seriously. And for church leaders, it's not just for leaders to weigh the words. The people must weigh. And it's testing the spirit. It really is. And the process then that is attached to the word of the Lord. I mean, a prophet just gives it, and they usually disappear over the hill if they're an invited person in. But we must take the word of the Lord seriously, because can I tell you, if we don't, and if we just let these words, be like spilt wine, the Lord just has to come again and say the same things over and over. We must value the word of the Lord, and that responsibility that an apostle takes, and the fivefold if you have it. And with the people, this is the learning experience. This is how we grow and mature, and this is how we get spiritual muscle together as we discern together. And fabulous times, but costly.
Yes.
And you realize, my goodness, this isn't just a nice comfort game. This is real. This is real life.
Now, I would say, Jen, I'm going to just say this and then pass over to you, but when you start talking about a word for a country or a
Yes.
nation,
Yes.
I think you're dealing with a different dynamic.
Yes, I would agree.
And we had this situation in Ireland where a very big name, I won't mention who it is, everyone would know him. Suddenly I was told he's coming into Dublin. Not by an Irish person, but somebody else. And he's a great prophet. And he came in. And unfortunately, I was in Toronto, so I couldn't do anything. And nobody else gathered the leaders. Leaders. He came in, huge gathering. I mean, the place is a big building, and it was full to the brim. And he gave these huge words for Ireland. 6 months later, nobody had picked them up. Nobody had done anything with them. I hadn't been there, but Louise had, I think, because I was in Toronto. And I'd been scuttering around for 6 months saying, what are you thinking about this, guys, to the leaders in Dublin? And 6 months down the road, we finally had a meeting. They said, oh, none of that came to be. It's irrelevant.
Because there was no maturity in realizing the conditions and how you work with a word.
So
and it's living
calling him
word.
almost, not quite calling him a false prophet, but
Yes.
not far
Yes,
off it.
not far off it.
Yeah.
And he
Such a
certainly
way.
isn't.
No, and he certainly, I think I know who you mean, because actually a very similar thing happened in Edinburgh with the same gentleman.
Yeah.
And but the inability to know that I have to receive that I have to work that out. And to be honest, most of us are 90 miles an hour, exhausted. Most church leaders are just like trying to hold themselves together. Most church leaders are struggling with depression. I mean, the stats on that are horrendous. My dad, I remember saying to me, and he pastored a church pre-social media, and he said, this was his phrase, and he was godly, and he was a man who understood cycles of rest. And he said to me, I led a church for 40 years permanently exhausted.
Wow.
That was what he said.
Yeah.
Permanently exhausted.
Social media is not that long. I led a church before social media. That's how scary it is. But I get what you're saying. And almost the sense, what, God, you're giving me something else to do here that I've got to spend another night of a week mulling over, and yet not understanding that actually the word of the Lord, when received and sitting in your hand, when breathed over, when picked through, when prayed through, actually can be the miracle of the key in the lock that transforms your world if you would but.
Yeah.
And there's that sense, Emma, of going and looking for help and saying, even if you're a local church or if you're a nation, saying,
Yes.
somebody we can talk to about this. I remember you came back from Nigeria.
Oh, I love
And
Nigeria.
one of the things you said
Yes.
really struck me. I was only here a while.
Yes.
And you came back and said, yourself and Simon gave the word of the Lord, and those girls and guys picked it up, and even by the end of the week or the next day or something, they were apostolically looking at what you had spoken.
I was stunned because I had never seen in any other nation. Now they did it in Jamaica, can I say, and they did it in the Netherlands. And I'm watching one or two key nations where there is the heart to action a word almost on the spot, to do the First Chronicles 2020, believe the prophets and you will prosper. So I'm with Tom Duval, Femke and Tom Duval in the Netherlands, and I bring it's in my other notebook. You were with me. Good News Netherlands, about the rise of the evangelists in the Netherlands. That gentleman has put €1 million into that word of the Lord to raise evangelists. Look, can I tell you, even if I was off my game, which we don't think we were, because it's been tested and the Lord gave him an identical word, so it's already tested by the fact that we had two identical prophetic words given in our sleep on the same night. But even if I was off my game, God will bless the honouring of the prophets.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And actually, I think we need to be very careful about how lightly we treat the word of the Lord. So when we do get the apostle who will welcome in, or the pastor, but who will welcome in the prophet, and despite saying so many pastors are exhausted, and I know they are,
Yes.
but actually, as you said, Emma, it's if they're listening to the voice. I mean, why ask people in if you're not going to listen? This isn't a game. It's the voice of the Lord,
It
and it's life.
amazes me.
Well, it's astonishing. And that one, following through with that word, for example, testing it, then actioning it as you feel right with your congregation. But that may be the key that opens the ease which will bring in the kingdom of heaven. And actually, just yesterday, I was really struck by the Lord in prayer saying to me, Jennifer, there's ease in everything I ask you to do. There's an ease and a flow. And when you start to see you're not in ease, then ask yourself if you're out of the right stream. And so back to what you're saying about the apostle, I mean, we've talked about, prophets coming in. Actually, the prophet coming in needs to really take that responsibility seriously, but know that, the apostle is welcoming the word, kind of on board with the word, and not sort of coming in to do a hit and run. Because that I've seen that happen too. Obviously, to some extent, it's over to the receiving church then, the receiving apostle at that point. But we've got to find this way of a kind of a marriage working together. And it does feel, I think you used the word, I'm pushing the microphone, but I think you used the word crisis at the beginning, Emma.
Yes, it is a crisis.
It is a crisis, and we are just going to be blocked and stopped if we don't begin to find a way to get the apostles and prophets working together. And the prophet within a church is different, you might say, to possibly to an extent, in that they're there all the time, they're giving corrective or directive words, they may not be itinerating, but the prophet who itinerates and who has a global mandate, who's moving around the world, meeting different apostles, those relationships need to be formed well to the receiving churches. But actually that prophet needs to have come, I would submit, from a very strong relational place in his or her own life with apostles.
Yes.
So when I was in my church, in the London church, I could bounce what I was going to be taking outside of the existing apostles. Sharpen me, tell me what you think, stop me, because I don't want to do damage. But then I'm sent in a kind of a safety because there's someone to go back to for correction. But I'm better because of it.
Yes.
I mean, it just to me is such a no-brainer.
Yes.
We're hitting lots of issues here, and I'm aware of our time, about 10 minutes left in this, and I do want us to talk solution. And I can talk directly to the prophets, you can talk to the apostles and church leaders as a team, but I can talk to the prophets. Guys, we have got to express and explain ourselves more successfully than we do. We have got to not be scared of the warm-up conversations that explain the office of the prophet. We have got to not be scared of and not go into ugly defensive mode. Don't you know? No, people don't know. And actually, the world sometimes where the prophet has already been, because of what you guys all typed in the comments for me 10 minutes ago, where you've not seen words come to pass, then you can understand why a church leader says, well, what's the point if nothing comes to pass? So the sense of explaining I remember Isabel Allen back in the day, I think when her first husband was still alive, amazing prophetic voice. She took a full hour. I'd never heard anybody do it. Wow. A full hour to say, when I prophesy over you, this is what you need to think, what you need to respond, how you need to. And I thought, I've never heard anybody do that ever. I have never heard anybody do that ever. Take that much time in our condensed society. Would we even, fast-paced, would we even allow somebody to do that these days? Would we even allow a prophet to come in an hour earlier and say, actually, this is how it works, guys?
Really good point, though, Emma, because is that not what we need to possibly start doing?
Yes.
Because, the responsibility is ours, perhaps, to just start making a case for what we bring.
Yes. So I do think, and I'm looking right at you down this central camera, and I'm seeing your comments here. Don't be scared as a leader, as a pioneer within the prophetic movement, to not just go, well, surely by now it should be established, so I just get to prophesy what I want. No, if you're alive and prophesying right now, I think there's a responsibility, because you are trailblazing a wave of revelation, that you come into much more robust, what I would call crossover broadcasts, crossover conversations of greater explanation. Yes, David, can you just block the guy who's being really rude in the comments? I mean, what's the point? We bless you. If you don't think prophets are relevant for today, you're probably on the wrong channel. So come on, some solutions, guys.
I think, and I'm going to speak more in terms of church leaders than specifically apostles,
Helpful.
because at the moment, the fivefold ministry isn't in such a healthy state that we can do that. But I think we have got to see the oneness come with church leadership. Now, for those of us who've been around for at least 20 years in leadership, unity is yesterday's story. I need to tell you that. Unity is yesterday's story, because unity will always burn down to the lowest common denominator, and let me assure you, it's not prophecy. But oneness...
Can we, yeah. I mean, just say that again, because we've been on it in the What the Prophets Say podcast, which will not come out for a few weeks till it goes into the editing suite. We were on that today and yesterday.
Oh, right.
Unity has not and is not possible. Unity is not possible in Christian monarchy and empire.
No. And I mean, we lived in a very religious society in Ireland, so there was plenty of churches, and we all got on well with each other until we tried to do something together. And then we had to burn back to the lowest common denominator that was acceptable to everybody, and it really never went anywhere. We managed to get a unity service once a year, and even that caused a few problems.
And achieved what?
Nothing.
Zero.
Just hard work.
Hard work.
Yeah.
But there is a whole concept that we must understand for the ecclesia, the age of the ecclesia we're in, and that's homothumadon, Louise's favourite word.
My favourite.
Favorite Greek
You
word.
know, homothumadon, this is a oneness of heart. I may not agree with you on all yours, and you may not agree with me on all mine, but we have a oneness of heart where we have built a relationship to the place where we can trust. Therefore, we can sit down and say, Joe Bloggs is coming into town. We know he'll say things. Let's set 2 meetings or something that we can talk to the town about coming in. So there's preparation, and that's what you're telling about, Isabel. She prepared people, and that's really vital. Now, you may not get the prophet to do that. You may get the leaders to do that. We're bringing this guy in. Here's what we expect, or this girl in. And then you deal with the follow-up, and you wrestle it, and you may have to go back to the prophet. And don't just write it off.
Yes.
I mean, we've dealt with a situation recently back in Ireland. I won't say too much about it, but you actually came, in that case, several years ago, came in and prophesied. And we had people come and say to us, but that never came to be, therefore false prophet. And I went back, because I wasn't at the thing, and I read it. And I'm going, but there was a series of things Emma said that I know you have not done. Don't tell me you've done it. And I went back to the person that, you haven't done this, so don't come and tell me it's false. Get back and start working through some of those things, and then we can start talking.
Yes.
And so it's the preparation. I think the biggest issue, the simplest one, there's probably all those more, is preparation beforehand and following up afterwards. Now, in a church scenario, that should be the easiest thing in the world.
Because we're in regular contact with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the context of somebody coming in to speak into the nation, I think it's a little bit more complex, but if they're coming in to speak to the nation, then you want to be doing that anyway.
And I find that you can only prophesy over a nation with very certain sorts of people who can weight bear in the room. And it's not even just about actioning at them, because I do think testing, weighing, actioning is kind of the entry level for dealing with a prophetic word. But if God is saying, I'm going to use this nation to do this in the world. You are way beyond, do I like the word?
Yes.
And can I pray through the word?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with like if I'm remembering a word over Denmark, that they're going to be a place where they build a runway, an additional runway in Copenhagen. They build hotels in Copenhagen because they're going to be the diplomatic center of the world wars because of their location. And suddenly a local church leader is not able to steward that, but you're needing in the room the people who can say, we want that for the nation. And therefore you have to have people who can weight bear the nation. So you need some significantly weighty people in the room who can hold something of national transformation, and not everybody is wired for that because they're too small-minded.
And we have a model for this already, because we do
Yes.
it with evangelists all the time.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how many of them have passed through Dublin. Louis Palau, Billy Graham.
Yes.
You keep naming them, the big ones in the
Yes.
past decades. Not so much now, but there's endless meetings beforehand to prepare the ground,
yeah.
gather
Teams.
people,
Yeah.
train
Teams.
them, and endless
Yes.
meetings follow up afterwards. Why not the same with prophets who are going to speak into the nation?
Very good. If you really want national transformation. So we're looking at responsibilities back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the point we were making, which you'll hear in the other broadcasts about the unity portion, is you can only have that oneness, the homothumadon, the Greek word for that kind of oneness concept, if you share the values of the kingdom.
That's it. It's kingdom.
Yeah.
Not my church, but kingdom.
But kingdom, yes.
Yeah.
Give us another top tip, Jennifer O'Brien.
Well, in terms of looking at this from a prophet's point of view, which of course is my bias, I love what you said there, Emma, about needing, for the bigger weight words, you need agreement in the room. And so, as prophets, to move into that, we need to maybe strategize and plan a bit better with the invitee forums when we're invited in, so that they're inviting beyond local church, but they're hopefully networked beyond that in the nation, so that they're pre-gathering, and this alludes to your training point, but pre-gathering the people who are going to be able to bear the weight of that, because there has to be a heart to make a change. That a prophet's visit isn't just unto airtime, it's actually to make a change, because look at the days we're in.
Yes.
We need to be available to God to make that change. And then at a much lower level, and this is just practical, but where we're seeing so many comments that there's no prophetic in churches, that still has a really valuable place. And yes, we want to be operating at prophet level to bring about change in nations, but we do want to not repeat the mistakes we've made in the last couple of decades of training people so badly, or not training them at the lower levels. And let's get that started, so that people, pastors aren't scared, or leaders aren't scared of even touching the prophetic. So my prayer is that we can see advancement in both those levels, and if we do, and if prophets will really get into good alignment with apostles, we can be really powerful to bring meaningful change.
I want to give you guys homework, okay? So I'm going to need you in the comments saying, yes, you can do your homework. I would suggest that you don't just watch this in isolation, that this is that we don't have all the answers. Clearly, we don't have all the answers, and we haven't identified all the problems, though we do know there's crisis within the prophetic movement of validity and acceptability and concrete, actionable words and measurable track records. So what I would love you to do is share this with some of your friends. But can I say about the homework, you need to have conversations. How do I implement a successful transformation in my region? We'll do our part, because we're broadcasters and communicators here, and we do travel around. We'll do our part, and our promise to you is we do our part of saying, look, this can be done better, and here's some top tips. But actually, somebody's saying I'm already behind. But do your homework to say, who can I have this conversation with? In how do I get the word of the Lord accepted, received, invited, trained, discussed? How do we do that in our community? You got to take responsibility. We all, imagine if all of the people watching here took responsibility. Somebody's saying they're already ahead. Somebody's saying they're already behind. Okay, on the same page, everybody in the comments. To work together for the word of the Lord coming into the nations of the earth. Now, Suzanne, the class behind the glass, is reminding me to say to you, we have pre-recorded, can I tell you, it's so controversial. It is so controversial. Is it 5 episodes on the patriarchy? It's under our title. Oh no, 7. I forgot how long we talked for. 7 episodes on the sin of the patriarchy and the control and the subjugation actually of both genders, as it turned out in our conversations, the pain of the patriarchy and the subjugation of both genders, both men and women. And actually, they are in our new series called Demolishing Strongholds. It is only available. It is only available on our PowerTV.app. We are putting it there. And so therefore you are going to have to can they download the app immediately? I'm getting thumbs up from my husband and my assistant. You are going to have to get onto, there's our faces on my phone. You are going to have to get your phones out. You are going to have to go to PowerTV.app, if I got the right address. And if you want it, it is there. And you will be transformed. And you'll probably weep along with us. It was we actually filmed it here. It was a highly emotional set of conversations on the subjugation of women and the neutering of men and the pain that we've caused each other in our domination mindsets and our slavery mindsets. I think David is coming towards me to give me some more information. Yes? Oh, do you know what? Do you know what some gorgeous human beings did? So we ordain some people. We have a group of assistant and associate ministers who are ordained by GPA. More on that if you want to get it on our website. And they do you remember I showed you, was it last week? Last week I said, or the week before, I love this painting. It's a pre-Raphaelite painter. And, David, can you give me I've got the bottom of it. And do you know what the associate ministers in GPA did? They bought me the piece of art do you see this?
Wow. Not the original.
Not the original. I don't know where that would be. Can we see it, David, on which camera do you want me to point it at?
That one's probably the easiest, is it?
This one. And this is, I was so moved by this piece of art. It's called Victory, Oh God, the grimy, grubby pain of a team working together for victory. Can I say John Sweeney, Rebecca Harris, Tanya Knowles, Stephanie Claiborne, Amy Zotter, and Rebecca Redneck and Bogdan, happy days. All of the glorious, John and Perla, I think I said them. All of the glorious people who are ordained by us around the world. Catherine Radlin is in there. The more we go on, the more I'll remember. Can I say thank you? That is Armpit Living. Aren't they amazing? Moses and there we go.
Aaron and her.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, guys. I love you guys. There's Suzanne. The class behind the glass. Thank you. You can see it's wobbling. So we are back next week for Power Hour, live again. Join us on Sunday. I preach a sermon. Now it's going to be a series. When do I ever do a series? Never in my puff. But I preached about the new earth, and some of you got a bit hot under the collar. Well, what does the new heaven do? I will teach you what that does next Sunday. This Sunday at Power Church. We will see you there. Bye.
Bye.